They say the Grand Canyon is the only place on Earth that still keeps its secrets. A wound so vast it swallows light, history, and anyone foolish enough to think they can map it. But hidden beneath the trails tourists walk every year, there are sealed tunnels, ancient corridors cut deep into stone. Some were found, documented, then quietly erased from public record. Others were discovered by accident and sealed within days. Cavers talk about rooms that hum, symbols carved into rock no one can date, and corridors that shouldn't exist where the canyon walls meet, and every time someone tries to explore them, something pushes back, with silence, missing data, or disappearance. Lock your doors, put on your headphones, because after this video, you'll never look at the Grand Canyon the same way again. The Smithsonian Cave, the discovery that vanished. It started with a newspaper article. April 5, 1909, the Arizona Gazette published a front-page report claiming that explorers working under a man named G.E. Kincaid had found a vast system of caves inside the Grand Canyon. The article described statues of gods, copper weapons, even hieroglyphs that resembled those of Egypt. The expedition, it said, was financed by the Smithsonian Institution. Then the story disappeared. No follow-up articles, no official report, no Smithsonian record. Nothing. For decades, that single page became the spark behind one of the strangest mysteries in American archaeology. Kincaid was real. U.S. Census records confirm a Gustav Kincaid, born in Iowa, veteran of the Spanish-American War, later listed as explorer. But there's no trace of any Smithsonian employment, no expedition papers, no cave coordinates. Still, the Gazette article was too specific to be fiction. It named Professor S.A. Jordan as the supervising archaeologist and even described the entrance, a sheer cliff face over 1,500 feet above the river. In 1909, that was terrain no one could have reached without ropes and luck. Years later, hikers in Marble Canyon reported finding iron rings drilled into the rock as if for climbing gear. Others claimed to see a rectangular opening far above the Colorado River, sealed with concrete. When locals tried to investigate, rangers warned them the area was off-limits due to unstable conditions. That's where the secrecy began. Between 1910 and 1925, dozens of letters referencing the Egyptian cave were sent to newspapers and the Smithsonian, and most never published. Some marked received with handwritten notes, no comment. The Smithsonian has officially denied any involvement. In a 1999 public statement, spokesperson Randall Creamer said, "There is absolutely no evidence of Egyptian artifacts in the Grand Canyon. The Smithsonian has never conducted such an expedition," but that only made the question louder. If it never happened, why are there coordinates that match the description? A section of cliff face in Marble Canyon marked as Restricted Research Zone since 1959. Satellite imagery shows something strange there. A symmetrical scar on the wall, 3 meters wide, rectangular, and lighter than the surrounding rock, as if patched. Geologists call it erosion. Local pilots call it a door. The Hopi people, whose ancestral lands border the canyon, tell older stories of underground chambers where the first people emerged from the earth and where light still burns without fire. They call it Sipapuni, the place of emergence. To them, the idea of a hidden city isn't fiction, it's memory. If the 1909 article was a hoax, it was a sophisticated one, written with the terminology of a field scientist, describing copper smelting, ventilation shafts, and chambers carved with precision unknown to modern tools. Even skeptics admit, whoever wrote it understood engineering, and yet every attempt to locate the cave since has ended the same way. Fences, sealed trails, or warnings from the National Park Service that certain coordinates are under federal jurisdiction. No official has ever confirmed what lies inside that cliff. But every year a few hikers return claiming they saw the opening and that something was watching from within. In 2015, a drone operator flying over Marble Canyon reported that his feed cut to static near those same coordinates. The footage recovered shows the cliff face for 3 seconds, then a brief flash of light from the opening. When he slowed the frame, he swore he saw something metallic, like a doorway closing. The Smithsonian cave may be myth, coincidence, or clever journalism, but one thing is certain: the coordinates that match its description remain sealed, fenced, and heavily monitored. No explanation, no access. And for a cave that doesn't exist, it sure seems well protected. But 15 years later, miners digging far from that site would hear something beneath the rock, a sound so deep and hollow, they sealed the shaft the same night. the Echo Cavern, where the sound never came back. In the spring of 1924, a small mining company called Canyon Minerals & Co. was drilling for copper in the remote Tuweep Plateau near the western edge of the Grand Canyon. It was an unforgiving place. Wind-carved mesas, no rivers, no towns, just endless red stone and silence. Their operation was routine until they struck an opening they couldn't explain. The miners thought they'd hit an air pocket, a natural chamber beneath the surface. When foreman Raymond Coulter dropped a lantern down the shaft, it fell for 6 full seconds before hitting something unseen. No sound came back. At first they assumed it was a trick of acoustics, but when they called into the hole, shouting, firing pistols, dropping rocks, there was nothing. No echo, no return. Just the hollow, endless quiet of a space that didn't behave like one. Curiosity turned to fear. The next morning, Coulter sent 2 men down on ropes to inspect the void. They descended more than 300 feet before one of them, Arthur Meeks, began screaming. His partner hauled him back up, bleeding from both ears. Meeks could only repeat one sentence. It's humming down there. He was sent to a hospital in Kanab, Utah, where doctors noted ruptured eardrums and disorientation consistent with exposure to low-frequency vibration. He never returned to work. When the company lowered instruments to measure depth, the readings came back erratic, 50 feet, then 200, then infinite. The sensors failed one by one. After 3 days, the foreman ordered the shaft sealed. But the story didn't end there. 2 months later, another team reopened the site to recover the lost equipment. They reported finding the ropes frayed, not cut, but worn down as if dragged back and forth for hours. There were footprints around the hole, not boots, but bare prints, smooth and narrow, pressed into dust that hadn't been disturbed since the miners left. The crew sealed it again, this time with concrete. Within a week, the camp began to experience what the foreman called acoustic interference. Metal tools vibrated in unison at night. Lanterns rattled without wind. And one night, the phonograph in the mess hall began playing on its own, the record spinning backward. By autumn, the mine was abandoned. The company filed for bankruptcy, and all mention of the Tuweep shaft vanished from geological reports. In the 1970s, a National Park Service survey accidentally uncovered the coordinates while cross-referencing old mining claims. When a ranger visited the site, he found a circular depression in the desert floor, as if the ground had settled over something large and hollow. He dropped a rock into the center. There was no sound. The report was quietly classified as unstable terrain, no public access. The location remains off-limits to this day. Acoustic engineers who later studied the case suggested that the absence of echo might be caused by a standing wave phenomenon, where sound waves cancel themselves perfectly in specific chambers. But that doesn't explain the humming or why electronic devices, even modern ones, lose signal near that region. In 2008, a team of geology students from Flagstaff tried to revisit the area with seismic sensors. They found the site fenced and marked U.S. Research Zone 7A. When they asked about permits, the National Park Service told them that zone does not exist. Local Navajo elders tell an older story about that place, a canyon where sound goes to die. They call it Nahuiu, which means the hollow that remembers. They say it's not that the sound doesn't return, it's that something down there keeps it. Even now, hikers who camp near Tuweep sometimes wake up to a faint hum under the ground. It isn't the wind, it isn't machinery, it's lower, like the heartbeat of the earth itself. They say if you call into the rocks, you might hear your own voice answer back, but not from where you expect. And decades later, near another sealed cavern, an explorer would find carvings that suggested those sounds might not be natural at all, but man-made. The Kincaid Chamber, an ancient city sealed in rock. The story of G.E. Kincaid didn't end with the newspaper article. It started there. After the 1909 report claimed Kincaid and a Smithsonian archaeologist had uncovered a labyrinth beneath the Grand Canyon, filled with statues, mummies, and copper relics, the world expected follow-ups, expeditions, photographs. Instead, the story vanished, and so did the man. But in the decades that followed, whispers continued to surface, and one in particular refused to die. In 1933, park rangers patrolling Copper Canyon, about 30 miles east of the Marble Canyon site, found a small opening in the wall above the Colorado River. It was perfectly rectangular, about 2 meters tall, and led into a dark tunnel lined with carved stone. Inside, they found what appeared to be the corner of a chamber. Walls smooth as glass, floor covered in dust so thick it muffled every step. One ranger, Frank Tolman, later wrote in his field journal, "The air was still like walking into a tomb. My lantern dimmed without reason. I thought I heard voices behind the wall." The chamber extended into the cliff for nearly 60 feet before ending at what looked like a doorway carved directly into basalt. Someone, or something, had sealed it from the inside. Tolman reported his find, and a week later, the Park Service closed off the entire sector, labeling it unstable. He was reassigned within the month. His journal disappeared from the official archive, but resurfaced in 1987 when his grandson donated a copy to the Arizona Historical Society. The entries include rough sketches, doorways, symbols, and a map of intersecting corridors that perfectly overlay the coordinates described in Kincaid's 1909 account. What makes it stranger is what happened next. 2 years later, in 1935, an aerial survey was conducted along the same section of canyon. Infrared imaging, primitive but functional, captured several heat signatures deep within the rock, arranged in a grid pattern. The photographs were classified by the U.S. Geological Survey and never published. The lead pilot, Henry Wharton, gave an interview before his death in 1968, recalling, "They told us not to talk about it, but I saw it. The shapes down there weren't caves and they were rooms, square rooms. Perfect geometry doesn't happen in nature." Wharton's statement matched another anomaly. Native Hopi legends tell of Patu Vota, an underground city where the ant people lived, beings who taught the first humans how to survive the great floods and droughts. To the Hopi, those chambers weren't tombs, they were sanctuaries. When compared, the carvings in Tolman's sketches matched Hopi petroglyphs for safe ground and light below. How those markings ended up hundreds of feet inside a sealed cliff remains unanswered. In the 1970s, several unauthorized expeditions tried to reach Copper Canyon. All were intercepted by park rangers or private security, sometimes before even reaching the site. One explorer, Bill Nichols, wrote on a forum in 2002 that when he asked for coordinates from the National Park Service, he received a call from an unknown number. The voice simply said, "That site doesn't exist. Don't ask again." Satellite images from 2011 show faint straight lines along the cliff. Like seams, they run parallel, 40 feet apart. Between them, a single white patch of stone brighter than the rest, as if something had been filled and polished. No one can confirm what lies behind it. The entrance is inaccessible by foot, and drone flights are restricted. But geologists studying the area notice something curious. Ground-penetrating radar shows a void, rectangular, consistent with a room, roughly 40 meters inside. Officially, it's called Formation Anomaly 42B. Unofficially, it's the Kincaid Chamber. Some say it's ancient, others that it's man-made. But everyone agrees on one thing. Whatever was carved into that rock was meant to stay sealed. Because if Kincaid's city was real, it would rewrite history and religion in one stroke. An Egyptian or Sumerian presence in pre-Columbian America would dismantle everything we know about the ancient world, and maybe that's why the canyon remains silent. Even now, pilots report interference near Copper Canyon, their altimeters freezing mid-flight, their instruments picking up low rhythmic tones, like breathing beneath stone. And somewhere out there, behind that sealed wall, the hum hasn't stopped. But 60 years later, when the government returned to the canyon for a survey, an entire research team vanished in the same stretch of cliffs, without a single radio signal or footprint left behind. The missing survey team. The radios went silent. In the summer of 1991, the U.S. Geological Survey launched a small, low-profile project along the northeastern edge of the Grand Canyon. The mission was simple: update geological maps using ground-penetrating radar and test new topographic imaging equipment near Nankoweap Mesa, one of the most remote, inaccessible regions of the park. The team consisted of 4 people: Dr. Alan Crawford, geologist; Marjorie Kent, cartographer; Tom Hadley, surveyor; and Daniel Yates, technician. They were scheduled to radio in every 12 hours. Their last transmission came at 9:17 p.m. on June 12, 1991. The message was short: signal clean, ridge mapped moving into secondary site, then static. No distress call, no emergency beacon, just silence. When they missed 2 consecutive check-ins, park rangers launched a search. The team's base camp was found 3 days later, fully intact. Tents zipped, food untouched, maps neatly folded. The only sign of disturbance was a strange series of shallow holes in the dirt near the equipment cases, arranged in a perfect semicircle, as if something had pressed into the ground, evenly spaced, then lifted straight back up. Their notebooks stopped mid-entry. The last line, written in Dr. Crawford's field journal, read, "Radar shows void pattern repeating. Impossible symmetry." The void he referred to matched the same coordinates listed in the sealed Copper Canyon region, only 23 miles south. When the data logs from the radar unit were recovered, they contained a repeating anomaly, a shape embedded hundreds of feet beneath the rock. It wasn't random. It was hexagonal. Within days, the search expanded to include helicopters and dogs. Nothing. No tracks. No bodies. Just an empty canyon and a broken radio antenna half buried in sand. Then came the strangest detail. During the second week of the search, all communication equipment in the area began to malfunction. Helicopter altimeters froze. GPS units blinked and reset. Radio static picked up rhythmic interference between 18 and 20 hertz, the same low-frequency band used for seismic testing. Experts later said it wasn't geological noise, it was a signal. When the data was replayed at increased speed, it produced a pattern of beeps and silences resembling Morse code. The translation was incomplete, but one sequence repeated 7 times. Under. The official report labeled the cause as radio feedback. Unofficially, 2 members of the recovery team later resigned, citing personal reasons. Both refused interviews. A year later, hikers discovered a metal tag embedded in sandstone near the site. A brass ID plate engraved, "USGS property do not remove." The strange part, the tag's edges were fused to the rock, as if melted. Tests showed no sign of external heat. The families of the missing scientists received brief letters of condolence, followed by a classified addendum citing environmental instability. The USGS quietly discontinued field testing in that area, and the coordinates of the site were redacted from subsequent maps. But a decade later, one of the men who helped recover the radar equipment came forward. He was 72 by then, and terminally ill. In an interview with Arizona Monthly, he described something he'd never told officials. The ground was humming. You could feel it through your boots. Like a generator miles below, it wasn't a cave. It was something alive. The interviewer asked if he believed the team was still down there. He paused. "I think they found the entrance. Since 1991, no one has been permitted to enter that section of Nankoweap Mesa without special clearance. On satellite maps, it appears as a blur, the terrain blurred algorithmically by automated systems used to hide military sites. When questioned, both the National Park Service and USGS denied any ongoing research in the region. Yet hikers along the rim sometimes report faint radio chatter when tuning to dead frequencies at night. Voices cut in for seconds, overlapping, distant, full of static. One phrase has been documented more than once: "Signal clean, moving into secondary site." The same words that ended their final transmission. But a decade later, new technology would reveal what the radar couldn't, and expose the section of the Grand Canyon the public was never meant to see. The restricted zone. What the maps don't show. The Grand Canyon is supposed to belong to everyone, a national park, a wonder of the world. But there is one part that doesn't, and it's not on any public map. In 2003, satellite imaging contractors working for a commercial mapping company noticed something strange on the canyon's western rim, a blank rectangle roughly 2 miles across, where the data feed returned nothing. Not black, not clouded, just white. At first, technicians assumed it was a rendering glitch, but the GPS grid around the blank area refused to calibrate. The coordinates looped back on themselves, a digital circle. Within a week, the area was quietly marked as Restricted Airspace R4803. That designation had never appeared before. Pilots flying tourist helicopters nearby were told not to cross the boundary for safety reasons. No official explanation was given. Then came the disappearances. Between 2004 and 2008, 3 separate groups of hikers reported being intercepted by armed rangers near the sector. Their descriptions were identical: unmarked uniforms, no name badges, radios without park insignia. One hiker, Elena Hart, later told Outside Magazine, "They weren't Park Service. They told us the trail ahead was closed for geological instability. But the ground looked solid, and I swear I saw lights coming from inside the cliff." 2 months later, Elena received an email from an anonymous sender. No text, just a single attachment, a photo of the same section of canyon, taken at night. In the center, a vertical seam of pale stone glowing faintly from within. Metadata confirmed the image had been shot less than 300 feet from the restricted zone. By 2010, Civilian drones were common enough to challenge those barriers. Several hobbyists attempted to fly into the area. Most lost connection instantly. One drone returned after 42 seconds with its footage scrambled by magnetic interference, but 2 frames survived. One showing a network of metallic cables embedded in rock, another a dark opening perfectly round, rimmed with concrete. The Park Service denied it. The USGS said there were no man-made structures within the Grand Canyon. Yet, FOIA requests filed by journalists turned up a maintenance contract for ventilation monitoring, Zone 7A, signed by a private company with Department of Energy ties. Why would the Department of Energy need vents in a national park? Whistleblowers inside the Bureau of Land Management claimed the site wasn't geological at all. It was archaeological, an extension of a sealed complex discovered decades earlier and reclassified under environmental secrecy statutes. One memo simply read, "Containment integrity remains priority. Public access not advisable." When reporters pressed for comment in 2015, officials issued a brief statement. No restricted zone R40803 exists within Grand Canyon National Park, but pilots still receive automated warnings when approaching those coordinates, entering controlled airspace. And hikers who skirt the rim say their compasses twitch, their watches freeze, and the air smells faintly of ozone, as if something beneath the rock is running hot. In 2021, a mapping satellite accidentally passed over the edge of the zone during a software glitch. For 2.7 seconds, it recorded heat signatures, rectangular patterns buried under 600 feet of limestone. When the image went viral on Reddit, the file was removed within hours. Users who re-uploaded it reported sudden account locks. Even now, if you open Google Earth and type the old coordinates of R4803, the view pans smoothly, then stutters, the terrain texture flattening into beige, like the canyon forgets to exist there. Locals call it the quiet section. They say at night you can hear a faint electrical hum drifting up the walls and see a single red light blink once, then vanish. The government calls it unstable terrain, but maybe the real instability isn't in the rock. Maybe it's in what's sealed beneath it, something that was never meant to be mapped at all. And in 2019, when 2 independent cavers managed to breach the zone's outer edge, what they recorded deep below would be the last thing anyone ever heard from them. The cavers' audio, what they recorded beneath the earth. In early 2019, 2 experienced cavers, Michael Reeves and Sarah Miller, set out to explore a narrow sandstone corridor on the northern edge of Glen Canyon, just beyond the official park boundary. Both were part of an independent group called Frontier Depths, known for mapping undocumented caves throughout the Southwest. Their plan was simple: test a new body-mounted acoustic scanner designed to map voids using sound. They never returned. Their footage, recovered months later, begins like any other expedition log. Headlamps cut through red rock. Michael jokes about the scanner beeping constantly. Sarah laughs, saying, "If it's echoing, it's alive." The tone of her voice changes about 20 minutes in. The corridor narrows. The floor drops. At one point she whispers, "There's wind." But it's coming up. It shouldn't have been possible. They were already 300 feet below the surface. At 2412, the scanner's audio starts picking up something unusual. A faint, sustained note below 19 hertz. The same frequency known to cause vertigo and fear in humans. Michael comments that his chest feels compressed. Then the beeping accelerates. The scanner was supposed to register reflections from solid walls. Instead, it detected movement. Something was shifting inside the rock. Sarah suggests turning back. Michael insists on one more reading. At 2647, the microphone captures a second tone, rhythmic, rising and falling, almost like breathing. They both go silent. Then Sarah says, barely audible, "Mike, the wall's warm." Seconds later, there's a scraping sound, stone against stone, followed by a low, resonant hum that overloads the mic. The footage cuts out. When rescue teams found their entry site weeks later, there was no cave. Just a smooth wall of new sandstone, as if the opening had never existed. Their equipment was discovered half buried 100 feet away. Everything was intact except the recorder. Its casing warped by heat, the data chip partially melted. Forensic technicians salvaged 18 minutes of audio. It begins with static, then settles into a repeating pattern. 3 pulses. Silence. 2 pulses. Identical to the low-frequency interference recorded near the Nankoweap Mesa site in 1991. When analysts sped up the waveform, it revealed a human voice, distorted, slowed, repeating one phrase, "It's below." The Park Service initially classified the case as a rock collapse, but internal emails later leaked to local journalists show that ground-penetrating radar scans were performed at the same location. They showed a cavity, circular, smooth-walled, exactly where the opening had been, depth unknown. When investigators returned 3 months later, even that cavity had vanished from the readings, as if the Earth had healed itself. Today, the recovered audio remains archived under a federal research program called Acoustic Anomalies, GC9. Only 12 people have heard it in full. One of them, a technician interviewed anonymously, described it this way: "It doesn't sound like a cave. It sounds like something under the cave, trying not to be heard." The last identifiable noise on the recording is a single human breath, followed by what experts labeled subharmonic resonance. But those who analyze the file call it something else: a reply. In 2021, hikers near the Glen Canyon boundary reported hearing low vibrations at dawn, like the canyon itself was exhaling. The sound lasted 12 seconds, then stopped, leaving the air perfectly still. Maybe the Earth remembers what was taken from it. Maybe it's still speaking, just too deep for us to understand. 6 caves, 6 sealed doors, and one hum beneath the Grand Canyon that no one can explain. Because if the sky can roar, what happens when the ground finally answers back? 6 caverns, 6 secrets the Earth tried to hide, each one found by accident, each one sealed again, as if the canyon itself was closing its own wounds. Maybe the Grand Canyon isn't a monument to erosion. Maybe it's a memory, a scar left open just enough to remind us how little we understand what sleeps beneath us. The government calls it geology, the tribes call it sacred ground, and the rest of us call it mystery, because mystery is easier to live with than truth. If you made it this far, and thank you, leave a like if one of these stories stayed with you. Tell us which cave you'd explore and which one you'd walk away from. But remember, some walls don't echo because there's nothing inside. They stay silent because something is listening.